All right, everybody. So this is Mr. Jetsy again, and I got Mr. McCauley helping me out this time, doing the video for me, and we're going to do the pigeon dissection here. So first off, do a couple quick looks at the feathers. You can see this is obviously going to be a wing here. So if you pull the wing feather out, you can see that the feather filaments on the trailing side are a lot longer than those on the leading side. And so anytime you see that asymmetrical sort of feather there, you've got yourself a wing feather. Whereas if you go down to the tail feathers, they have equal length filaments on both sides. And that's how you can tell if you got a tail feather that you found maybe on the ground or something like that. So the wing versus the tail, just look for that asymmetry. Of course, the feathers on the chest, those are called the semi-plume. And you've got these little bristle feathers on the face, very, very small guys and such. All right. So, oh, and lastly, too, the really cool thing was to look at the feet, and you can see why these are classified as archosaurs. Those scales do not overlap on the feet, and you can also see kind of that reptilian ancestry. And think about, dinosaur movies and Jurassic Park and velociraptors and their feet and stuff, what they look like. I mean, that's what they look like, And again, that's why birds, they come out of that theropod group, which includes T-Rex and velociraptor and all that good stuff. So you might be wondering if this is a male or a female bird. I do not know. None of their genitalia are to the outside. They have right there the opening to the cloaca. They just call that opening the vent, but the whole structure itself is the cloaca. And the gonads are inside, so we're going to get into this bird first to see some testes or the single ovary. Birds only have one ovary. Might have two, with one can do the job. Now testes, they still do have two of them. But anywho, in order to get this thing going, we're going to take some of these chest feathers here and start at the bottom and just kind of pull them up anteriorly, and they just kind of rip right off. It's really nice, easy peasies. Okay. Now, as I'm coming up here, I've just ripped into the crop. All right. So as you guys can see, this kind of hole right there, and get my thumb down in it. So as I was ripping, the skin came apart, and I've entered in this little area up top where they store their food. And actually, oh no, I didn't quite get into the crop just yet. So I need to get through this little bit of material too. So I'm just gonna rip it. Boom, there it is. Oh, and look at that. We do have a little bit of seed in there that this bird has been storing, and it would be moving that seed down into the rest of his digestive system, little bits at a time. And it does that through this hole right down here. Can we get that angle down into right there where my thumb is? All right, so you guys see that little pinch together? Almost looks like an anus or something. There's a sphincter. That little muscle clamps down that tube. That tube that it leads to is called the proventriculus. We'll see that in a few minutes. And that leads on to the gizzard. So these seeds right here, birds don't have teeth. So if they swallow these seeds, they're just going to be whole, sitting right here in the crop. And then as they move down into the gizzard, it has swallowed rocks as well. It will grind that seed up against those rocks to pulverize it to get all their digestion going, okay? Physical digestion, really. So, and if you look closely too, these are the little things that they make honey smacks out of. The whoopsies, like sugar smacks, honey smacks, the frog, oh, you gotta have my smacks, right? Yep, that's definitely that stuff. I think it's oat, pretty sure. All right, so now, come down here, and we're gonna rip a little bit more of these feathers off. And I can feel the bird's breastbone right there, its sternum. They actually call it the keel on a bird because it's just so large and thicker than our sternums. And that's because these two big old muscles right here we call the breast meat on a bird, the white meat, those are pectoralis major muscles. It's the same muscles that we work out when we do push-ups and things like that. So they have very, very large pec muscles and a huge sternum to have that pec muscle attached to it. So when they're beating their wings during flight, they don't rip their muscle off the attachment and go plummeting down to the ground to their death. So that's a adaptation they've had for flight, increasing that sternum so you've got a larger surface area for the muscle to attach. All right, and so now what I have to do is I have to cut around that pec muscle on either side here and here, and then I'm going to make a little slit in the bottom. I'm going to try to get my finger right up there, up under that sternum. You can see me kind of getting under it right there. And I'm going to kind of peel that whole thing up and expose the bird's internal organs. All right, so I'm going to start with the scalpel blade, and right there. I don't want to go too deep now. I can go deep at the front end because that's all muscle right there, but then I'm going to go more shallow as I go down because there's less and less muscle down there. All right, so now, not quite enough. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to take my scissors. Actually, I'm probably stick with the scalpel here at the end. All right. And there's that nice crunchiness. All right. Yeah, when I was doing the snake, that crunchiness did translate pretty well in the video. So I'm sure you guys are hearing that right now. So I can see the heart and the liver right away. And just to make this easier, I'm going to take this piece right there. I'm going to go ahead and cut it free so I can just get it out of the way. So I'm going to take my scissors, just crack right through that breastbone. Boom. There you guys go. Chicken tenders. All right. The pigeon tenders instead. I hear pigeon tastes pretty much like chicken. I never had it, but they say it does. Okay. And I'm going to take another slit down here. That material, I'm cutting through this material is called the peritoneum. It covers all the gut digestive organs down there. And yeah, I can see most of my digestive tract now. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is get the heart out. All right. So you can see the heart dead center, and you can see the two atria up top, and there's actually two ventricles on the bottom too. The heart of a bird is quite large compared to its body. Our heart is nowhere near this size for our body. But, you know, it just makes sense because, again, birds flying way high, you know, they need a constant supply of blood to their muscles, or they may very well run out of energy and, again, plummet to their death. So there's the heart right there. Turn the back side, you can see some of the vessels up top. And these are this is dried blood here. So I've actually gone into both of the two atria. If I take a little bit of tweezer right there, I can kind of pull out this big wad of clotted blood. Okay. And another wad of clotted blood right there. All right. Oops. Kind of tore the heart right there, but you see me digging out those ventricles. All right. Now get into, the atria. And to get the ventricles, if I lay the heart down, take my scalpel blade, and go in it this way. Oops, I'm upside down. Go in it this way. We should be able to go ahead and see the other two chambers, the ventricles. All right, and there they are. Okay, that right there, this is the right ventricle. You can see the wall is relatively small because this ventricle is just pumping to the lung and back. This ventricle over here is a far larger chamber. Actually probably have some, yeah, there's more of the chamber over on that side, obviously. And that left chamber, you can see how much more muscular it is on the side of the wall versus that of the right chamber right there, very thin muscle, okay? And so that left chamber is the one pumping out to all the body tissues. All right, now back over here, you can see where the heart was sitting down in here. This whole structure is the liver. The birds have a pretty good sized liver, and they do not, though, have a gallbladder. Birds do not store bile. Birds, remember, do anything they can to keep their weight down. And if that means not storing bile in a gallbladder, they'll do that. So as I take the liver out, you can see it's a very solid, kind of glandular organ. There's not much give to it. It's not hollow like the way a stomach is or the heart was hollow. This is glandular. All right. And then a little further down, a little more liver. Get that out of the way. Get that out of the way. I'm going to start to get into the back, and I do have a girl here. You can zoom in, you can see little eggs all right there. Those are little developing eggs, and they'll be one at a time would be developing and being laid. These are probably not fertilized or anything. Could be, but it doesn't look like it. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move into the digestive tract. I'm going to come back up for the respiratory tract at the end. But anyway, I'm kind of pulling up the front end of the digestive system, and you guys can see this tube right here. That tube is the proventriculus. That leads all the way up to the crop up here, where that little opening was right there, that little sphincter. That's the start of the proventriculus, and it goes beneath the trachea. You can see a little bit of the trachea right there. I'm going to pull that out a little bit later, and you can see it better. But then it moves on down, and here it is coming out, and it heads to this big old structure here, and that is the gizzard. And it is very, very hard, very muscular. It is hollow, and we'll cut into it in just a minute. As I turn the corner, you see this, the intestines begins on the other side of the gizzard. So birds, by the way, don't have an actual stomach. They have the proventriculus, and then they have the gizzard. So it's like two parts, but neither of them are actually called stomach. And so here is the first turn of the intestine. This is known as the duodenum, the first little stretch. And this kind of flat tongue-like organ that's sitting in there is the pancreas. And this is a lot more structured of a pancreas than you're going to see in a lot of animals, even humans. our pancreas doesn't have this sort of solidness to it. Ours looks more like cottage cheese or something. And it does sit, though, right beneath our stomach at the first little stretch of the intestine. So it's in the same spot, but a very different look. And so this bird pancreas always like really tracks that first bend of the intestine really, really well. All right. So I'm going to kind of pull the intestinal tract free, kind of breaking some of this mesentery. The mesentery is the tissue here that kind of holds all this together, and it has the blood supply to the intestinal tract. All right. And as I keep pulling it out, you can see I've got all the intestines here. And if I follow it down near the very end, you guys can see these two little balls on either side of the intestinal tract. And those are called the colic ceca. Humans, where the small intestine meets the large intestine, there's a little pouch called the cecum, and the appendix hangs off of it. You guys have probably heard of appendicitis and things like that before. So these two little pouches right here are analogous to the human cecum, and they mark the spot where the small intestine stops and the large intestine begins. But as you note, there's barely anything to the large intestine. It's right there at the cloaca already. So birds, again, trying to keep their weight down, always lose their poop very quickly. They get that feces on out of there so they can lighten their load and fly more easily. So what's the point of having a very long, large intestine? You're just going to hold more waste in there and thus be heavier. So very, very short and large intestine, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and clip it at the end of that large intestine. Again, keeping those colic ceca right there. So large intestine, that's it. Small intestine, everything else. And so you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's a lot bigger. I agree. And the large intestine is much shorter than the small intestine in the human, but it's bigger around. So we still use the same sort of terminology, right? So I'm going to come up here, and I'm also going to snip it at the proventriculus. And now I've removed the entire digestive tract, right? From the proventriculus to the gizzard, to the intestines, and on down, okay? One other thing before I cut open the gizzard, if I roll it around to this side, you can see the spleen. Okay, so the spleen is, like in other animals have done so far, involved in immunity. It cleans out dead and defunct red blood cells, but it also houses a bunch of white blood cells that it uses to inspect your blood for other pathogens. So that's the spleen. It's right there by the gizzard and by this pancreas right there. Okay, so I'm going to set the bird to the side for a moment and open up this gizzard for you guys and see what's inside. There should be some rocks in there and probably some ground up food. And the material is normally green. So if you guys remember, I said the gallbladder is absent in birds, but that doesn't mean that the liver does not take or doesn't use bile or make bile. So bile is a green substance. Where's my, oh, there it is. Bile is a green substance, and it's likely going to be staining all the stuff in here green, all right? So the way to get into this is to start on one side, and you can't just cut straight through because you're going to be hitting rocks in there, and it really dulls up the scalpel blade and things like that. All right, so we cut around. Keep going. Try it on the side right here. This is way tougher than you think, guys. Okay, I'm in. All right. So open it up. All right, not all that green, actually. Less green than it normally is. So anyway, in there right now, you've got a bunch of ground up seed, like those, sugar smacks and stuff I was talking about earlier. And there's a lot of rocks in there too, but they're all mashed up together, so it's kind of hard to figure out what's what. So if you use a Petri dish, so I got a little Petri dish right here. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to dump that out there. You can already hear those rocks hitting, right? There are definitely rocks in there. So I can clean out most of it. And by the way, guys, you might have eaten chicken gizzards before. It's really similar to this pigeon gizzard, but the problem is you got to make sure you clean those things really, really well before you serve them up to people because of the rocks. There's been many people who crack their teeth eating chicken gizzards as they bite down on one of these rocks right here. All right, so I'm going to come to the sink right here, and we'll turn on the water flow a little bit. So I do that, all the food's floating to the top, and the heavy rocks are staying on the bottom. And after a few seconds of this, I have now cleaned all the rocks free. And you can see they're kind of pretty, actually. There's greens and reds and stuff, all sorts of different little stones. Okay? A lot of them, little rocks. And so eventually these things get ground down so much that they either pass out of the digestive system or the bird will actually regurgitate them up. And they swallow new ones for continuing to feed. All right. So back to the birdie here. Let's get down near the bottom. We're going to see her kidneys and we're going to see that ovary. So if this was a male, there would be 2 testes, one right here and one right here, and they'd be kind of cream colored and maybe about the size of, maybe a little bit larger than the spleen was right here. So there's that spleen. So it'll be down in this area, maybe a little bit bigger than that, 2 of them. But this is a female, and again, that is the wad of eggs right there. That's the ovary. And this is the oviduct. So those eggs would be moving down through this oviduct right here, and they'd be get a shell put on them as they get bigger and bigger, and then they would be birthed out of the cloaca, the same chute where urinary wastes and digestive wastes come out. All right? So if I take those ovaries and just kind of pluck them out of the way, I'm starting to expose the kidneys in the back. And so kidneys are lower back against the spine, just like they are in us. And if I get my fingers under here, all right. So there's, I can see them. It's kind of hard to get them out though. Let's move tweezers. All right, so here's one kidney right here, right? I can see one lobe. There's a second lobe. There's a third lobe up there. See if I can get a, yeah, there we go. There it is, the 1, 2, 3 lobes of the kidney. 1, 2, 3. All right. So those are good to go. And then if I got on the other side, I could get that other kidney up too. It's kind of tearing it up here. But I just want you guys to see where they actually are. So deep against the back. Move that other. Deep against the back, both sides. So again, there's, let me see if we can pull one up. There you go. All right. So there's the 3-lobed kidney. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And the last thing I want to do, guys, is get to the respiratory system. Now, if you look, you can see I've got like a little sac right there, right? And there's another one on this side. Those are air sacs. Birds have the most advanced of all respiratory systems. And again, makes sense. They're flying, they're up high, there's less oxygen the higher you go. So having these air sacs helps you get more oxygen out of every breath. And also if you run out of oxygen and you're just like on the ground, well, you just stop and catch your breath. But if you run out of oxygen way high in the sky, you're in trouble. So these air sacs here help to hold extra air in the bird, and they're able to actually push fresh air across their lungs even when they're breathing out. So they're always getting oxygen in the lungs. It's pretty cool. So where are the lungs? They're kind of right here in this area, kind of behind where the heart was. And you can see the trachea right there that'll be leading to. You can see those little ridges, just like we saw in the snake dissection. So if I get my thumbs around to the edge of the rib cages there and start to work them around, I can get down to where the lungs are. And there it is right there. I'm under it. And now I'm under the other lung. And what I'm going to try to do, guys, is I'm going to try to get these lungs out, still attached to the trachea. You know, the trachea breaks into the left and right bronchi. You probably heard bronchitis before, right? And that's an infection in the bronchi, which are the tubes leading to both of your lungs. All right, so there are the lungs right there, and you can see the indentions on the back of them. That's from the ribs. You look right here, there are the ribs. And so each of those ribs right there is an indentation on the lung. Okay, so now if I come back, all right, the video cut out, so we need to finish it up. I'll just attach a second video, I suppose. All right, so here is the trachea, and I'm just going to cut it right there. So here I've got the lungs out, and I'm just going to try to get it to where I can get the other material clean from it. This part of the proventriculus kind of comes behind the lungs there. I just want to get it just a little clean, so hopefully you guys can see the bronchi coming over to each side. Maybe a little more scissor action is prescribed here. Let's see, let me come up this side. Because there's some proventriculus right there. You see that little hole? That's the proventriculus. Okay. Oh, I just hit, darn it, I just ripped it. I messed up. Oh well. It's actually pretty hard to do, to get these things clean with the trachea still holding on to them. So, there they go. There's your lungs. 2 good-sized lungs for this bird. Pretty big. And if you look, you can actually squeeze them. Oh, it's a little blurry there. And if I squeeze them, you see some of that liquid bubbling out of them. And that's just because of all those air sacs in it got filled with the liquid they used to preserve it. So that would happen with your lungs if you drowned or something like that. Okay, so guys, that is the gist of the pigeon dissection. Hope you enjoyed it.